The clock on the microwave blinked 6:45 p.m. The kitchen smelled of buttered popcorn and leftover takeout. My fingers moved quickly, arranging the last of the appetizers. On a tray, my ears tuned to the sound of Logan's voice from the living room. Make sure. There's enough for everyone. Sophia, he called, his tone light but laced with an edge I had learned to recognize. I swallowed back a sigh. A night was game night, and Logan's friends were coming over, which meant I was on hostess duty. It wasn't an explicit rule, but I had played this role often enough to know how it went. I glanced at Logan already. 2 drinks and stretched out on the couch with his feet propped up on the coffee table. His dark eyes flicked toward me for a brief second before shifting back. To the screen, some show played in the background, though I doubted he was. Paying attention, living room needs to be set up, he added, lifting his glass. For another sip. Do it quick. Yeah, I nodded, already moving toward the mess of board games, playing cards. And scattered coasters. The coffee table bore the marks of previous nights, like this, ring stains from bottles that had sat too long, crumbs from chips no one had bothered to clean. As I bent down to straighten the area rug, I felt Logan's gaze settle on me. Again, you're good at this. You know, he missed keeping things nice. Maybe next time, don't take so long. The comment stung more than it should have. I kept my mouth shut, focusing instead on aligning the stack of cards. It wasn't worth arguing, not when the night had barely started at 700 p.m. sharp. The doorbell rang. The shift in atmosphere was instant. Logan sat up, grinning the annoyance from earlier. Vanishing like smoke, he clapped his hands together before making his way to the door, throwing it open with exaggerated enthusiasm. Look who finally made it, he called. The group filed in, bringing with them the scent of aftershave cologne and the faintest trace of something stronger. The room filled with laughter and familiar voices. Mark, Nathan, a few others I recognized, but hadn't spoken to much. They greeted Logan with playful shoves and half-hugged backs, slaps, their energy buzzing through the space I carried in the first tray of snacks. As I set it down, I noticed Mark's gaze linger on me longer than necessary, his lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. You're spoiling us, Sophia, he said. Reaching for a handful of pretzels, his hand found my shoulder in a casual touch. Too firm, too familiar, a quick squeeze, before he withdrew. Logan caught the movement but only smirked, shaking his head, slightly as if amused. She's a natural at taking care of people. Logan remarked, too bad she takes forever to do it. The group laughed and I forced a smile, my fingers tightening around the empty tray. I knew the game. I knew how Logan played it. He loved pushing, prodding, towing the line between lighthearted and cruel just to see how I'd react. I didn't react instead. I excused myself to grab the drinks, hoping the kitchen would provide a moment of solitude. As I pulled bottles from the fridge, I heard their voices drifting in from the living room, loud, careless, comfortable in their space. The night had just begun, and already I felt like a spectator rather than a part of it. And somehow I had the sinking feeling that I wasn't the only one, watching the clock edge toward 900 p.m. in the room pulsed with energy. Voices, overlapped laughter, rose in bursts, and the occasional slap of cards against the table punctuated the noise. The air had thickened with the mix of drinks and cologne, the scent of warm snacks fading beneath it. I moved between the kitchen and the living room, refilling glasses, picking up stray crumbs, making sure everyone had what they needed. It was second nature by now, keeping things running smoothly so Logan could enjoy his night without a hitch. He was already past tipsy, lounging in his chair like he owned the world. His sharp eyes flicked toward me when I walked past, but he didn't say much too. Caught up in the conversation about some ridiculous Bethy and Mark were making, and then, as if remembering I existed, Logan turned in his seat. Sophia, be useful, he said barely, looking at me. Go grab more drinks, we're running low. A familiar squeeze tightened in my chest. But inaudited, I had no say in these things, I just did them. The cool air outside was a relief. As I stepped onto the quiet street, leaving behind the heat and noise of the apartment, the store wasn't far, just a couple of blocks away, but I still rushed, wanting to get back before Logan, and found another reason to be irritated when I returned. His face was already clouded over. Took you long enough, he muttered. Reaching for one of the bags in my hands, it was barely a complaint. More of an observation, but Ike knew that tone and ember before the fire. I opened my mouth to respond, an apology, an excuse. Anything but, before I could, Nathan's voice cut in. Relax, man, he said, with an easy grin. Maybe she just needed a break from us. The tension in the air shifted. Logan huffed, rolling his eyes, but let it go. The conversation turned, moving away from me and just Like that he was forgotten again, Nathan caught my gaze, offering a small smile before motioning toward the balcony. "Come on," he said. "You look like you could use some fresh air." I hesitated. Logan wouldn't care. He was deep in his game, laughing too loudly. At something Mark had said, the rest of the group barely noticed me. So I followed the balcony door, slid open with a quiet hiss, and we stepped outside. The night air was cooler now, the distant hum of the city filling the silence between. As the view stretched wide, rows of apartments with their windows glowing like fireflies. In the dark, Nathan leaned against the railing, tilting his head toward me. "Rough night," I let out a soft laugh, more breath than sound. "Just a long gone." He nodded as if he understood, even though I doubted he really did. We didn't know each other well. He was just another, one of Logan's friends, someone who showed up on game nights, someone I handed drinks to without much thought, and yet for the first time all evening, I didn't feel like a shadow in my own home. "You put up with a lot," Nathan said. After a beat, not a question, just a statement, I looked away, pretending to focus on the city lights. "It's fine, is it?" I turned back to him, but he wasn't smiling anymore. He was studying me, reading something on my face that I'd meant to show before I could answer. Hand brushed against mine, light brief, like testing the waters. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. The space between us felt smaller. Now the air charged with something that hadn't been there before. Nathan shifted, slightly closer, his voice dropping. Lower Sophia, and then Sophia. Logan's voice crashed through the moment, yanking me back to reality. I stepped away from Nathan so fast it felt like breaking free from something invisible. My pulse hammered as I turned toward the door. Logan stood inside, his silhouette framed by the warm glow of the apartment. "Where you go?" His voice was light, but I knew that tone. Nathan cleared his throat, just getting some air. Logan's eyes flicked between us, and then just as quickly he grinned. "Well, hurry up, you're missing the best part." Nathan hesitated. I moved first, stepping past him and slipping inside, back into the noise, back into Logan's world. But as I walked away, I could still feel the heat of Nathan's hand where it had touched mine, and that, more than anything, made my heart race back inside. The atmosphere was even heavier than before. The noise felt sharper, the air warmer, the energy more reckless. Logan had another drink in his hand, his laughter blending into the background noise as I slipped past him toward the kitchen. My fingers tingled, and my heart hadn't slowed since stepping off that balcony. Nathan followed. It wasn't intentional. Not at first. Maybe he had meant to grab another drink. Maybe it was just coincidence. But when I reached for the cutting board, and he reached for the same thing, our hands collided again. This time, neither of us moved away. I felt the rawness of his skin, the contrast against my own. My breath caught for just a second, and when I glanced up, Nathan was already looking at me. A silent moment stretched between us, long enough to be noticed. Nathan's voice was quiet. "You okay?" I swallowed, nodding. "Yeah," just the sound of Logan's voice from the other room cut me off. Breaking the spell, he was too wrapped up in his conversation to notice us, but the moments mattered just the same. Nathan cleared his throat, stepping back as if realizing he had crossed a line, or maybe I had, but it was too late. That line had already blurred. We busied ourselves with the fruit chopping, arranging anything to give our hands something to do. But the weight of what had happened, what almost could have happened, hung between us. The knife slipped in my grip, barely missing my fingertip. I sucked in a breath. Nathan reached for my hand instinctively, his fingers curling around my wrist. "Careful," he murmured. I should have pulled away. I didn't. His thumb brushed lightly over my skin as if he wasn't entirely aware he was doing it for the second time that night. I felt my body betray me. The kitchen suddenly felt too quiet. The space too small. His eyes locked onto mine, searching, waiting. And then so slowly it felt deliberate. He leaned in, not much. Just enough to feel his breath against my cheek, enough to see the hesitation flicker in his gaze, enough to know that if I didn't move, if I didn't stop this, right now something irreversible was about to happen, and yet I didn't move. I let it happen. The kiss was soft, almost uncertain at first, a whisper of something that shouldn't have been but was undeniable. It lasted no more than a second too long, a second too dangerous. Nathan pulled away first, his jaw tight, his breath unsteady. I shouldn't have done that, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I exhaled slowly, my pulse hammering. I know he studied me for armament, as if trying to decide whether to apologize or to do it again. But then Logan's laughter boomed from the next room, shattering whatever had built between us. Nathan took a step back. I turned away, pressing my hands against the counter, trying to steady myself. This wasn't me, this wasn't who I was, and yet as I touched my lips with trembling fingers, I realized something that terrified me. I didn't regret it. The night stretched long, dragging on with the weight of something unspoken. The kiss lingered between Nathan and me like an invisible tether, unseen but unbreakable every time our eyes met across. The room, the air seemed to shift, the silence thick with meaning. Logan, oblivious, was growing, impatient. His drink slashed as he waved, his glass, his words slurring slightly. We're out, he announced, his irritation creeping in Sophia. Go grab more, I blinked. Pulled from my thoughts now, he scoffed. No. Next week, of course, now. I hesitated, glancing at the clock. It was nearly midnight. The streets would be quiet. The store almost empty. A perfect escape, Logan sighed, rubbing his temple. Why do you always make things difficult? A familiar prickle of shame crawled over my skin. I didn't arg. I just grabbed my coat and left. The night air was crisp, sharp against my heated skin. My steps were quick, my heart still unsteady. I replayed the moment in the kitchen over and over, the warmth of Nathan's lips still lingering on mine. What had I done? I had crossed a line and yet I couldn't bring myself to feel guilt. The weight in my chest wasn't regret, it was something else, something I wasn't ready to name. My phone buzzed. I expected Logan, maybe a demand, maybe another complaint, but when I pulled it out, his name wasn't on the screen. It was Nathan. Where are you? I hesitated before replying. Store. Logan sent me 3 dots, appeared, then vanished, then finally don't go back. My breath caught. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could feel the undercurrent of something more in his words. Don't go back because of what had happened, because Logan was getting worse, because he saw something in me that I refused to see in myself. Another message came. Come here. Instead, the invitation settled in my bones like a decision I hadn't realized I had already made. I should have gone home. I should have. Instead, I found myself standing outside Nathan's apartment, my pulse hammering in my ears. The bag of drinks hung heavy at my side, but I didn't move to knock. The door opened before I could. Nathan stood there, his expression unreadable, his eyes darker than I remembered. Neither of us spoke. The door shut behind me, sealing us inside, and for the first time in a long time I felt like I could finally breathe. The door clicked shut behind me, the quiet of Nathan's apartment pressing in. It felt different. Not like home, not like Logan's world, but like something else entirely. Something safe. Nathan stood a few steps away, watching me. His expression was careful, unreadable, like he was waiting for me to say something. First, I didn't know what to say. I had spent years smoothing over Logan's moods, fixing things before they could break, but here in this space that wasn't mine, there was nothing to fix. Nathan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I wasn't sure if you'd actually come, neither was I. I admitted. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips, but it faded too fast. He took a step closer. You don't have to go back tonight. The words hung between us, heavy and full of meaning. I whispered, but do you want to? I swallowed hard, my hands tightening around the bag of drinks. I had left Logan's world behind tonight. But I wasn't ready to admit. Why? Nathan must have seen something in my hesitation, because his voice softened. You don't owe him anything, Sophia. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. You don't understand, it's not that simple. Yeah, he murmured, it is. His fingers brushed mine light and hesitant, and for the second time that night I didn't pull away. The air in the room shifted warmer, closer. My pulse pounded in my throat as I met his gaze. Nathan's voice was low. Tell me to stop. I should have. I didn't. Instead, I let go of everything that had kept me in place for so long. I let myself want something for once. Hours passed in a blur, a tangle of quiet confessions, lingering touches, stolen moments that felt too real to be a mistake. For the first time in forever, I felt weightless, like I wasn't someone's obligation, like I wasn't a ghost in my own life. But reality always catches up. The knock on the door came just as dawn crept through the windows. It wasn't a frantic pounding, but a steady, deliberate sound that sent a chill through my bones. Nathan stiffened. Beside me, his body instantly alert. I didn't have to ask. I knew who it was. Logan. I sat up, my breath shallow. Nathan's hand found mine, grounding me. For just a second before he stood, he moved to the door, hesitating only for a moment before cracking. It opened. Logan's voice drifted in low, and even where is she a pause, Nathan didn't answer immediately, and that silence said everything. I felt it before I even saw him. Logan pushed the door open wider. Stepping inside, his eyes found mine, instantly lock on me like a target. He didn't speak, didn't yell, didn't react at all, and somehow that was worse. The Logan I knew was loud when he was angry. He pushed, he taunted, he made sure I knew exactly where I had messed it up. But this was something else entirely. His silence wasn't shock, it was acceptance. Like he had already known like this was the final nail in a coffin that had been waiting to be closed. Logan met my gaze, holding it for a long, agonizing moment. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. The door shut behind him, the weight of it echoing through the room, and just like that, everything I had ever known was over. I hope you like my videos. Kindly comments, please.